Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Endless Space 2. So this one is going to be a continuation of our Vodyani guide here, and this one's going to be talking about the mid-game, and basically for the Vodyani, this is where you pivot in a direction towards your victory. Unlike pretty much every other faction in the game where you're probably going to want to have a general idea of what type of victory you're going to want to go for relatively early on, you can kind of hold off on that decision until you reach pretty much around this kind of turn here. In any event, though, what we've decided for this particular game is that we're probably going to go for an economic type victory. Now, the decision to make an economic victory is going to be based around the types of luxury resources that we have access to. But the Vodyani can sort of pull off any type of victory from any kind of position so long as they're able to get their colonies out. Now, we've had our colonies kind of spread out and decentralized in a way that's kind of horrible, but we're still going to be able to manage with that despite that. So what makes this... what makes the Vodyani particularly good at getting a victory? It doesn't have to be the economic one. Well, it's their arcs. The arcs are sort of central to everything they do and everything they're capable of doing. Doesn't matter what type of victory we're going for, we're going to need quite a few of them. If I'm going for, of course, the Conquest type victory, then I need to have one arc for every planet, so I would have to have 32 arcs, which, you know, fair enough. That just means that I have them all set to producing loads and loads of essence, and maybe have a couple of them set to producing production. The way that you sort of get a science victory for the Vodyani is not through lots of science buildings and lots of the normal things. It's instead getting lots of arcs with science bonuses to them, because arcs are capable of producing resources. Same thing for economy. If you want to go for the economy victory, you spend all of your time and effort building arcs that are capable of producing loads of money. Now, you don't do this in the early game. What you're waiting to do is get into a better position, get enough planets. I find 8 to be enough. I could get up to 9, but, I could get up to 10. It really depends on what's sort of available. We will eventually get up further, actually, due to the little laws that we have enacted. But what we're trying to do is just get to a stable, steady position where we've got all the resources that we feel like we need, and then we can go ahead and start upgrading our arcs. Now, once you do decide what you're going to be doing, you're going to want something like, say, the Tendrils of the Church as a technology, or you're going to want, I don't think you ever really want that one. The Applied Casimir effect, if you're going for Conquest, could be a really particularly good one, because it allows you to get way more essence, but also it allows you to siphon energy off of planets a lot faster, so this becomes quite a powerful module here. What I find odd about Drain Essence is that it's actually worse than Almost Provide 2, which is kind of janky, but it does allow you to siege planets. You could also get Wreath Essence later on, which is, for some reason, again, equal to Almost Provide 3, but it at least is equal. I don't know how they do the math for these. But in any event, but yeah, let's say that I'm going for a science victory here. I can't remember where the hell this is here. Is it this one? Yes, Almost Study Tier 3 here. So if you're going for the science victory, so you can basically custom tailor your arc in this sort of band here. You could also get it from Autonomous Materials at this sort of tier here if you're going for either of those victories. I find, like, I skip Autonomous Materials quite often and just go straight for these guys because I find that I usually just go for all the colonization techs in this level here, and it's a little bit, like, by the time you've got the colonization techs, you've got access to tier 4, so it really is going to depend sort of on what you're doing and sort of how you go about doing it. But in our particular case, we have got access to Tendrils of the Church, which gives us a humongous amount of money from this upgrade. So we can go ahead into our arcs here and redesign them. Of course, if we were going for the science victory, we would go for the science modules. If we were going for conquest victory, we would keep them as they were. If we were going for the wonder victory, we might want to consider changing to production now. And if we're going for supremacy, we might consider changing to production now as well. So either way, though, we're going to go ahead and change up all our arcs here. Almost Tithe. It's going to take me a little while to get all these. We also have access to this one. I don't tend to get that one. Just makes it so that you can't blow up the Vodyani arcs in space battles. I don't really mind them getting blown up in space battles because that usually means I've screwed something up horribly. But in any event, let's add all that in there. I think these are all fine as far as this all goes. Now, this isn't even the top tier of arc, but this is going to be good enough for now. So for the next little while, we're going to start slowly upgrading our arcs, which is going to cost us only 216 for this one. So we can go ahead and upgrade that guy. I think we've actually got some Type 6s that are going to cost a little bit more or less here, but looks like actually our fully modernized ones only cost 98 to upgrade, so we can basically upgrade all of our arcs. Now you'll notice that my essence is dropping quite precipitously, but we are capable of going through and just upgrading all of these guys here to this new design. And yeah, one of the things that you'll notice right away is our income has gone from something like 1.5 thousand approximately to 6.3 thousand per turn. This is going to keep going up way, way, way higher, but this is how we're going to start earning our dust victory. If we check the economy tab here, we're nowhere near what we need to win, but we've just sextupled our amount of dust that we're earning per turn. So we're going to be able to sort of win on that virtue by itself. If we were going, of course, for the science victory, we probably would have done something similar to the amount of science that we're producing. We probably would be getting something like another 3,000, 4,000 science per turn. So we would be getting through these techs blazingly fast at that point in time, allowing us to really, really quickly get up to this tier here. And of course, we'd also really quickly also gain access to Almost Study Tier 4. And it is such a humongous science bonus by the time you get access to this one that you're gonna basically be able to complete the entire tech tree in like no time flat. So that's kind of what you do once you sort of hit this phase of the game. You could do it a little bit earlier if you really don't need to colonize a certain planet type, or if you just want those techs from that particular tree. We're going for an economic victory, so we need to be a little bit more careful with how we're spending our science. But generally speaking, once you've got to this point, all you're concerned with now is defending yourself. Now, I didn't invest as much in defending myself as I probably should have under normal circumstances. The reason I've gotten limited defenses is that we sort of spawned near the Vaulters, and the Vaulters, Vaulters as well as minor factions near the Galactic Center. If you're near the Galactic Center, you tend to be near this region here by the Academy, and the Academy does not spawn anything usually right on top of it. So we had a lot more space to work with than we normally would have. But at the same time, we also got cut off at a bunch of places, so it's kind of neither here nor there. But what this meant was we didn't have any hostiles directly beside us, so we did have the opportunity to avoid fighting. If you're near something that's hostile or violent, you might want to change to a Conquest type victory based on that information. But if you're not, you can go for a science type victory or an economic type victory the way I've gone for it. But even if you want to go for an economic victory or a science victory while you're next to someone that's a little bit more belligerent, just scale down on the amount of technology and production and income that I'm getting, and focus a little bit more on building warships, because we still have the ability to produce some warships here. We have actually got, I think, the relatively high level of command points there. We got 3, which is not terrible. I probably actually do need to go ahead and grab, at the very least, this one here, but in any event, we are working towards it. So, yeah, that's kind of how things are right now. I probably also need to change, actually, what we're doing here. So, in any event, there are some things that we can talk about in terms of ships as well. So, if we're going for a Conquest-y type victory, the Vodyani are pretty decent at that in terms of their ship design. But there are a bunch of different philosophies that we might have in terms of our ship design for these guys, depending on what type of victory you're going for. For ours, we don't need huge fleets, and they don't need to be super, super mobile, were it not for the fact that our positioning is kind of crap here. This is actually not the design that I was going for. I haven't actually built any of these guys yet because I haven't bothered. For this type of ship there, we're probably going to go for something along these lines here. I might switch one of those out for a support module. We're probably going to just chuck in 3 of these basic Maggie lasers here. And these things are pretty good for what the Vodyani are. We are going to go for the medium tier ships for these guys just because I do have access to the resources that we need for that. So we're going to go with something like this here. I think that this is a fantastic design all around. Go ahead and apply that one. And for the shield here, our medium coordinator, this is going to just be a defensive ship primarily. It's going to have some access to these things, but realistically speaking, this guy is going to be around to accelerate our fleets and, more importantly, to defend our fleets. So that's the priority here. We're not going to go with too many of the support modules. We're mostly just going to go with defensive type modules there. Once we get the upgrades, that's going to continue to be the case because, again, we don't need to take out enemy planets. We're not going to bother with the rack or the gouge here because we've got a decent stable amount of planets and stuff like that. And these ships are substantially weaker, in my opinion, than the medium ships for the Vodyani. Most of the time with this faction, you're going to find that you're relying on the brand and the shield just because they're much, much better ships than the rack and the gouge. And the carrier is really powerful, but it's not necessary for this particular faction. You're still probably going to want to research the ability to get the carrier, but for this type of setup here, you're just going to be using the the medium ships there for defensive purposes. You're going to have them stationed around your planets, you're going to have them blocking star lanes, and you're going to have them moving around. Now, I do need a little bit of support modules on my shield because I do need to move it around to block enemy fleets a little bit more than I normally would want to, but it's nothing too serious there. So we're probably going to start actually producing a bunch of these guys from our capital here. You want to have one per lane, so this would be a good start here. Probably going to also have to up the production on this planet on my capital, honestly, but nothing I can really do to up the population really that, or the production really that easily on my capital right now. Deal with that later. In any event, though, that's kind of what we're looking at here. We're just building up defenses at this point in time. We're just continuing along with our tech tree. Eventually, we will get the tech to get access to Almost Provide 4, or Almost Tithe 4. Once we do that, we can switch over. We'll probably be earning something closer to the realm of like, I think you can get. I think I beat this particular file on like 50,000 dust per turn. So switching over like that hard really earns you a ton of cash as the Vodyani. And again, we'd probably be getting tens of thousands of science if we were going for the science route. If we were going for the conquest route, of course, we'd have to continue to gain the essence at our accelerated rate. It's gone down quite a bit. The reason that we're still gaining essence here is primarily through species stability. We get +2 per every population that we have, and since we have quite a few populations, we actually get quite a decent amount of essence from that. Now we could also try and get essence from other things here, but they're not really available to us right now. So sometimes we'll get other laws depending on how things go. I think construction, I think like industrialists had some or something like that. There's probably one in pacifist, if I recall correctly. Can't remember for sure, but in any event, though, that's kind of how the Vodyani work here. We're just sort of turtling up while we get our money. It's a lot more than most factions would be able to get under these circumstances. We're going to eventually want to get trade routes going back and forth around our different planets there. In this particular case, if you're going for science, of course, we can ignore trade completely. But in this particular case, it's going to be something that just slowly enhances the amount of money we earn. Now, admittedly, if I'm starting trade this late into the game, we're probably only going to be earning about like maybe 20,000 or 2,000 per turn in trade once we get that established. But it's still better than nothing, and it's something that we can spend our money on as well. So yeah, lots of things to think about if you're going for conquest, but not so much for the other ones. You're just going to be hitting end turn until you sort of get to the end there. Now, if we are going for a more conquest victory, again, we're still going to want to focus on the brand and the shield type ships here. The brand with the upgrade is still going to be focused around damage, and I do still think that the Vodyani are pretty good with the lasers, but once you've got the upgrade, you could turn these guys into missile destroyers. They do have enough slots at 5 that they can deal some pretty good damage with missiles and bypass a little bit of flak defense from other types of ships there. There are some factions that have enough weapons on their defensive type ships, like if you're up against another Vodyani, that you're not going to be able to overpower them with the missiles on this class of ship, though, and their flak defense will shoot down almost all of those missiles. Now, the shield, though, is what really makes the Vodyani capable in terms of attacking other planets, though. This ship is just overpowered. The Ledum class, it is probably the best ship in the game. If it isn't, it's close to it. You do need to have these guys set so that they've got lots of support modules so that you can move quickly from planet to planet and that you can quickly siege them down. The Vodyani also have stronger than normal troops, so you don't necessarily need as much manpower to take out a planet, but it's going to help if you also gain access to one of those. We don't have access to any invasion technology because we didn't really bother getting anything other than the slugs here, but if you are going for that, you might want something like, say, the, I think it's over here, the OPEX gear at this tier over here instead of maybe the survival suits or something like that, or if earlier on you could have gotten ubiquitous surveillance for the O2G delivery gear if you wanted it earlier, but realistically speaking, you're probably not going to take over too many planets in the early game. You're probably going to just go straight to OPEX gear. So yeah, the reason that we're going for the shield is really just because it's such a really powerful ship. There's nothing inherently wrong with the rack design here, the Toy Sam or whatever. This is a fine ship. There's nothing inherently missing. It's just that it's completely overshadowed by its big brother. Like, this, I'm not even exaggerating, is probably the best coordinator in the game. It's capable of being a carrier if you really wanted it to be. It's really quite good at defense if you really need that. It's got tons of support modules. It actually has more support modules than, or it has more modules overall than even the Riftborn coordinator, which Riftborn are sort of notorious for having more slots than anyone else, but having them be completely rigid. You can't really sort of customize a Riftborn coordinator. It has to have certain numbers of weapons, has to have a certain number of support modules, it has to have a certain number of defense modules. This thing is amazing because you can sort of like use this thing for a support module if you really want to. You could use this for extra defense, so I can make this really, really tanky, or I could use it for ground invasions, or the fact that it's so many slots on this type of ship that I could have it be defensive and offensive and good at ground invasions and support the fleet. It's just that good at that sort of role. So this is one of the reasons why the Vodyani are pretty good when it comes to invading other planets. They've got the ability to rely on this class of ship for those ground invasions. And it just is one of those sort of linchpins of your fleet no matter what you're doing with the Vodyani. I would highly recommend getting at least 3 of these in every single fleet that you have so that they can defend each lane. And in this particular case, just because the gouge is so lackluster, I would definitely recommend using the brand as your offense. You could theoretically use your carriers, however, or Arks even, as additional ones. Now, Arks can actually be used as pretty decent offensive ships. At this point in time, they're looking at 931 damage, and they only actually take 4 command points. It says 8 in some tooltips, but yeah, no, these things actually can be used as warships as well if you want to put them in the lane. Alongside a defender, they can dish out some real hurt there. I still think the brand, though, is better value for money in terms of offense, so you're going to, generally speaking, be relying on these guys throughout a Conquest type victory. Now, if I did have the ships all still on our Essence collection, right now, we'd be gaining it at about a rate of 700, so we'd probably be getting an arc approximately roughly every 10 turns. One of the things that you're going to want to consider getting if you're doing the Conquest type victory, you're still not going to want to neglect this sort of area here, but what you're going to want is actually the Applied Casimir effect here, not only because it can give your arcs the extra from star systems, but you can also start building gigantic fleets of leechers with the Drain Essence module. And what's fantastic about this is that it helps out your sieges quite a bit. If you're sieging a planet and you've got a whole ton of things, like an entire stack of leeches with the Drain Essence module, you're sucking up so much food from that planet that they're losing 1 population every turn. This means if you're doing a ground invasion and you're siphoning population, they're losing 2 population per turn, 1 to draft, 1 to the Drain Essence. And in addition, this is going to accelerate your ability to build arcs. So you're going to be spamming out arcs even faster as you keep taking things over. And then you can sort of use those arcs to produce more stuff in the front lines and continue sort of snowballing against your enemy in a way that's really, really hard to stop. So that's kind of the way that you use these if you're playing as the Vodyani in a Conquest type victory. So yeah, that's basically everything there is to the Vodyani as a faction. They're really kind of interesting just in the sense that I'm at turn 89 and I've just suddenly decided that I'm going to go for an income victory. I'm going to go for a dust victory. If I had chosen to, I still could have taken this position and gone for a science victory, or I could have gone for a conquest victory from this position. So there's a ton of versatility to what these guys do and how they sort of play out. But no matter what it is you're doing, you're going to be able to rely on those medium tier ships. If I didn't have access to Hyperium and Titanium, I will have another video out for how to gain access to resources without having access to those resources. But in any event, that is our mid-game Vodyani guide. Once you're here, once you've established yourself, it really is just a matter of churning forward, continuing to get minor improvements and stuff like that, continuing to take over little bits of plants whenever you get a chance to. But primarily speaking, yeah, we can kind of coast our way to a victory here. So in any event, I hope you found this video enjoyable, and of course, as always, I hope to see you guys all next time.